Hello and welcome to the Football Hipsters English Breakfast Podcast. For once, I am your host, Kris. I know, it's been a while, but luckily due to everything falling into place, Sundays are once again my day to host. So I'm joined just by one person this evening. It's like old school. It's just me and Ross. Hello, Ross.
Good evening. We should have got Danny back.
We should have, shouldn't we? Well, he's probably not out of bed, in fairness. I mean, it's 6:30 in the evening, so there's a good chance he's not actually risen from his festering pit yet. But you never know. But Danny will, I'm sure, return one day. But until then, just me and you, we wanted to do our regular pod because this is technically our penultimate English breakfast of the season, is it not? So,
yeah, I suppose it is, actually. Yeah, never thought of it like that.
It only just dawned on me recently as well. So one more week of the Premier League to go. We'll probably do some sort of FA Cup based thing, I would imagine, and of course we'll do a sort of sum up pod as well, I'm sure. So but yes, this is the penultimate standard English breakfast of the season, so let's jump in, shall we, Ross? We're going to go all the way back to Friday first of all, because we have finally crowned champions in the Premier League, which is where we're going to start this week. I think we saw it coming a while ago, but it was all done and dusted. Chelsea winning the Premier League with a 1-0 victory over West Brom. And it was an unlikely hero, Michy Batshuayi, of all people, coming off the bench to score in the 82nd minute to claim the silverware. I don't know whether you actually saw the game, but there's probably not a lot to talk about a 1-0 away win, but more about Chelsea as a whole. Worthy winners of the Premier League, do you think?
Absolutely. I think both you and I called it at the start of the season. We said they'd probably be favourites for it in our eyes. I'm not sure either of us expected them to do it as comfortably as they ended up doing it. But if I'm being honest, I think they're probably the most complete Premier League side I've seen since I started watching football, because I got into it just after the Arsenal Invincibles. But I think from back to front, I think this Chelsea side has been as good as a Premier League team as I can remember, possibly even more so than Sir Alex Ferguson's Man United. Did have a few wobbles here and there, but none that I don't think concerned us for any more than perhaps a week or two. So very worthy winners, and an excellent campaign from start to finish, in my opinion, for Chelsea.
Couldn't have said it better, especially the last bit. But yeah, I think you're right. It's I probably am going to have to say that the Invincibles for me. I suppose I'm a little bit biased.
Oh, I think if I'd seen the Invincibles, they would have been mine. But I missed them by about a year, I think. Yeah, I think we could. I also think the Manchester United side of the treble winning year, the '99 vintage. I think they were up there. But I agree with you. Of recent memory, recent history, Chelsea are definitely up there with a side. This situation we had, of course, when they lost to Arsenal, the 3-0. That was when we got the turnaround in formation. We got the Conte back to the back three. He got them more sort of regimented. Some of the star players were dropped. Other players are brought in. If you look at sort of Victor Moses getting more regular run, and they signed Alonso into fullback as well. Matic sort of started coming back into the side. What's the evolution now of Chelsea? I mean, we expect them to spend big, do we, in the summer? And do we expect them to go again with this same formation? And I suppose we have to ask, is the manager still going to be there next season? Well, that was the point I was going to make. I was listening to John talk about it. I can't remember on what platform, but John was talking about the possibility of Inter Milan going for Antonio Conte this summer, because they're now going to be coming into a lot of money from their new Chinese takeover. So there's a possibility that the manager may be on the move. I mean, he sounds quite happy to stay, but I think Inter Milan are kind of leaning on the fact his family haven't moved to London yet, I believe. So I mean, there's still a question mark there. I personally think he would stay. I think the challenge of taking this team on again is quite enticing, personally, because we know that Manchester City will come back firmer next year. We know Man United are planning on spending a crap load of money. We know that Arsenal are going to come again next year. We know that Liverpool are going to strengthen. So making this Chelsea team, as good as it has been this year, is going to be tricky, especially if some of these players are either going to be surplus to requirements or are going to want to move. I think it's nice that Michy Batshuayi is the man that got the title-winning goal, personally, because I'm not sure he's going to be there at the end of the season. So it's going to need a little bit of touching up, I think, here and there. But I think at the end of the day, you've got a very good core there, because even players we haven't seen, like Chalabar, only played 9 times this season, and Nathan Ake, who came on back obviously from Bournemouth. I think there's some good players to come through next season, but they will need they will need a bit of a facelift. So I think personally, it's a very exciting job for Antonio Conte next season, but clearly question marks will be asked of him and quite a few of the players, I imagine.
Yeah, it's that difficult second album, isn't it? It's the where do we go from here scenario. I agree with you. I think Conte will probably stay another season. I think there will be a few casualties in the summer to that squad, as you say. I think Michy Batshuayi will probably move on, if for nothing else, just to play a game of football. I think probably someone as high profile as Fabregas will likely move on as well. Maybe even one of the wide players. I don't know whether Willian would want to sit on the bench for as long as he has this season again.
No, we don't know about Costa yet either, do we? The rumours of him going to China.
Absolutely, yeah. Costa is, a lot of talk around him, and then of course it opens the door for how many players come in. So if you had the amount of money that Chelsea obviously have got at their disposal, I went all Dutch there. If you had the money at their disposal, after you'd had a lovely shopping trip around London and spent oodles of Roman Abramovich's cash, what sort of players would you be looking to bring in, or what positions in this summer, based upon obviously the fact that some might move on? Is there any specific players you'd look at and think suit that system, or suit the Conte way, or even suit the club?
Ooh, it's tricky. I think the position would probably be either centre-back for John Terry, who's leaving this season, or up front as another option for Diego Costa, either because he's going to be going or because perhaps Michy Batshuayi will be going. Players in mind is difficult. The only one I can really think of that I would look at if I was Conte would be Bernardeschi, who I believe is at Fiorentina.
Yes.
But that's not one of the positions I just mentioned, so it's difficult to know exactly. But I think Bernardeschi would suit the style they play, especially if he was dovetailing with Hazard. But then you have to drop either Pedro or maybe Willian. So tricky. There's no one player out in the window at the moment that leaps out at me, but certainly someone like Bernardeschi. I mean, Griezmann, I think is rumoured to be on the market this year, even if not by choice. But if he is on the market, I'm sure a team like Chelsea would love to have him in their side.
Yeah, if he doesn't go to United, of course. But the one I keep looking at, and I wonder, is whether they might have a look at Mauro Icardi at Inter. I wonder if, with all the changes going on there, and he's always seems to be a player that seems to be left out of conversations, but he's one that I think would attract quite a lot of interest this summer. So we shall see where he might end up, especially under a Conte management. I wonder if that would work out quite well. So, yeah, it's a tough one to judge. Final thing on Chelsea then, before we move on to the other bits and bobs this season. When you look at obviously they've won this Premier League this season without any European football, international Champions League football, I should say, international football. Do you think that's going to affect them moving forwards next season? Is that where they've got to find the balance now of sort of looking at these fixtures and trying to manage 4 competitions essentially?
Absolutely is going to be a huge part of their season. I'd actually clean forgotten they didn't have any European football this year, so that's another reason for Conte to stay, I think. But yeah, no, it's obviously a challenge, and we've seen other teams suffer in these recent title races, I should say. Steve saw a team like Leicester last year who didn't have to worry about European football, and they managed to get themselves over the line. And this year, you've now had Chelsea, so they will have to do a bit of squad management. And again, that will play into the kind of business they do in the summer. They will need to keep some depth. So yeah, it's going to be tough. But I think a team like Chelsea, with the players they've got and the manager they've got, assuming they all stay, should be more than up to that challenge.
Agreed. It will be a very interesting summer to see what happens at Stamford Bridge. Another club that will have an interesting summer, I think, is Everton. Just very briefly covered their game with Watford. They get also won 1-0 on the Friday night. The only goal of the game was from a man who potentially was signing off at Everton. Ross Barkley with the winning goal. Your old friend, Big Ronald. Very outspoken in the post-match comments, as he has been all the way through the season. Some was outspoken, actually. Some would just say honest, but he's been very blunt about the fact that if Ross Barkley does not sign a new contract, that he will be sold by the club. Is that good business? Is he slightly overrated in your opinion, or is he a player that will fit potentially a club like a Tottenham or a Liverpool moving forwards? Is he a player that can make that step to the next high level if he moves on?
I suspect it's just business for a guy like Ronald Koeman, whether it's good or bad. I think for him it's just a situation he needs to deal with. Again, nearly everything Ronald Koeman does is with one eye on Barcelona, so if he thinks that it's a good chance to put his foot down with a kid like Ross Barkley, then he's going to do it, especially considering what an integral part he is to this team. Whether I would make that threat myself, I think would depend a lot on the situation with Lukaku. If you knew he was going to be staying, then yeah, it's a threat you could probably get away with. But if you don't know that for definite yet, much like Arsenal, if they lose Ozil and Sanchez this coming window, I think that's too much loss for Everton to lose Barkley and Lukaku in one window. I could definitely see him fitting in somewhere like Tottenham Hotspur. Would depend on the money they'd have available to them given the impending stadium move. But I would imagine you'd probably get Ross Barkley for somewhere between 15 20 million. If Tottenham had that in them and had that available to them, I think he'd slot in quite comfortably. I don't think he'd need to be sold as quickly perhaps as someone like Harry Kane might if the stadium payments start to catch up with them in a season or two. So I think Barkley is a player that Pochettino would love working with and would fit their system. So I could see that happening. But of course this is all speculation. He could very well turn around and sign a new deal next week. But this feels like a bit of a power play on Koeman's part, and you never know how a player's going to react to that. He might just say, you know what, I was going to sign until you gave me this deadline. So we won't know. We won't know until a couple of weeks' time yet, but I could definitely see him fitting in somewhere like Tottenham.
Yeah, it's the sort of club I could see him at as well. So it'd be another one to keep an eye on over the summer, methinks, especially with an England international who, for some reason, are still very much sought after when it comes to summer windows. Couple of teams we should cover just in a couple of sort of dead rubber fixtures, if you will. Bournemouth beating Burnley by 2-1 on Saturday. Big seasons for both, really, isn't it? When you look at it, I mean, the goals, Stanislas and King with Bournemouth goals, Vokes with one back from Burnley. Both clubs safe for another season. That will be their ambition most seasons, do you think? But both impressed you throughout the course of the year?
Bournemouth had some wobbles. I remember at the start of the season, my bottom three that I predicted was Hull, Middlesbrough and Bournemouth, because I just didn't know how they'd react given some of the sales they had as well. And I think if not for Nathan Ake during the first half of the season, they could have been in worse shape. But they did have Nathan Ake. They had a very good first half of the season. Around January, when he went back to Chelsea, they wobbled, and they kind of skirted near relegation for about 3, 4, 5 weeks. But they turned it around. They've been very impressive. And, you know, a side like Bournemouth, who, given the history we all know, about 10 years ago they were almost out of business, and here they are now, second year in the Premier League. I think this is now their highest Premier League points total, and they're still on course for their highest Premier League finish. They could yet finish above Southampton, which will be big for them. The fans in Bournemouth certainly put a lot more emphasis on the feud than Southampton do, so they would absolutely love to finish above us, I don't doubt. So yeah, for Bournemouth, they've had an excellent season. They need to make sure the recruitment's good this summer, though. They can't have another dangerous window like they did last year. And then as for Burnley, I mean, first season back in the Championship, or back in the Premier League, I should say, not a lot of people believed me when I said that Burnley would be safe this year, but I think they've proved a lot of people wrong. I think they've surprised quite a few people as well. It's been an excellent season. I think Sean Dyche deserves a lot of credit for it as well. Next season, though, they cannot afford, despite the size of their club, and despite the fact they'll just be looking to stay up again, they cannot afford another away fixtures or away form, I should say, like they had this year, because that's just not tenable, and eventually fans will get upset. So there is work to do for Burnley, but it's a fantastic platform to build on after an excellent season, methinks.
Agreed. And two clubs with fairly small budgets. And was there something going around about, I think it was Eddie Howe and Steve Fletcher were both playing for Bournemouth last time they played Burnley or something?
I can't remember.
Absolutely cracker stat. But yeah, I mean, fair play to them both. I think survival will be the key to them moving forwards. Your boys, Southampton, got a victory over Middlesbrough, who obviously, since we last recorded a podcast, were officially relegated. They lost to Chelsea, of course, on the Monday Night Football, which set up Chelsea's title win on Friday, and that condemned Middlesbrough to the Championship. You called it. At the start of the season, you said Middlesbrough will go. I think a lot of people didn't agree with you. You've been proven right. So have your moment in the sun, and while you're at it, you can talk about Claude Puel's managerial celebrations, because he absolutely loved those 2 goals, didn't he?
Yeah, he has to. Yeah, I mean, Middlesbrough, I think I've spoken ad nauseum at this point about my concerns about Middlesbrough in the Premier League. I was afraid since day one they'd be a glass cannon. I think Aitor Karanka was as well. That's why they played as defensively as they ended up doing, especially the first half of the season. When Karanka left, Steve Agnew came in and tried to have the Shakespeare effect that he had at Leicester, and tried to get them playing more on the counter, a bit faster, and it's just not worked. I think they've either been undone by low morale in the end or just lacking in quality as we hit the run-in, and they just fell away, and it just became untenable for them in the end. So it's a shame to see them go down, because they've been away from the Premier League for so long, it was really nice to see a big Premier League name like Middlesbrough back up in the top division, but unfortunately it wasn't to be. Hopefully they can come back up stronger next season, but I think they're going into a much tougher Championship division than they were in last season, so it was going to be hard for them. Southampton, on the other hand, I mean, I've spoken again ad nauseum about Clopwell at this point. The first half of this game was terrible. I get some people on Twitter saying, well, if you don't like it, don't watch it, or it can't be that bad, or he's done a good job. I mean, you just need to watch first halves like we had at Middlesbrough. They're just terrible. One good moment, which is when Shane Long burst over the top, played an early ball to Jay Rodriguez, and it's a really good finish. Aside from that, the first half was awful. Second half wasn't a lot better, but we had 2 goals in it, and there was a bit more goal mouth action, a bit more endeavour from both sides. But it was a really risky game for Claude Puel because he made, I think it was 7 changes in the end. He gave debuts to Caceres and Jeremy Pie, and it was just a really, really difficult game for him to have made those kinds of changes in, especially with the midweek fixture against Arsenal going so poorly for us as well. So it was a danger, and I think he rolled the dice, and thankfully for him, it's come up trumps, but could have gone very badly wrong. I'm glad it didn't, clearly, but it could have been a huge, huge explosion for him. But these 3 points, another good result, they will help him as we get to the end of the season, because I think if he finishes inside the top 10, then any lingering concerns from the board over is he the right man, I think will probably go. If they finish below 10th, then there may be questions again. So it's a big 3 points. We have Man United and Stoke left, both at home, before the end of the season, so we could still finish 8th, but this felt like a make or break for Claude, and he did it his own way, with many changes and many possibilities, but we've come away with the points, so it's the main thing for him.
Yeah, job done indeed, and bring out the black box in the summer for all those transfers and whatnot once again.
That's the thing. If he's going to stay, then this team needs gutting, because it's clearly not working for him. You know, if we're meant to be playing some enterprising, free-flowing 4-3-3, then we haven't got the players for it, and we need investment. If this is how he wants us to play, and we're not going to be making too many changes, then I have a funny feeling I'm going to be sat here this time next year going, man, we were awful in that first half all over again. So, big summer.
Yeah, big summer indeed. And another club that's probably going to have a big summer now is Swansea City. Now, we're going to tie 2 results into one here, because obviously there was a very key result from this game which led on to the Sunday game. So Swansea went to Sunderland knowing that if they won the game, then they were potentially going to stay in the Premier League, or it was in their own hands. They went to Sunderland, they did get the victory, they won by 2-0 Lorente, and Kyle Norton's first goal for Swansea, which was a bit of a ripper. I think it's fair to say that, I mean, we've done Sunderland to death this season. Their fans were even less impressed than they have been all season. They were absolutely horrid in this game, from what I can gather. But Swansea got that result. We'll just touch on that first before leading into Sunday. Swans impressed you sort of since Paul Clement's come in and done what he's done? I mean, they've been a little bit, again, a bit up and down, but there's been improvements there, hasn't there? There's been a structure as to what they were trying to do by the looks of it the last few weeks. Yeah,
I mean, before Christmas they were in freefall under Bob Bradley, and then under Guidolin before him. It all seemed a bit of a mess, and when Paul Clement came in, it seemed to a lot of people, myself included, like they were preparing for life in the Championship, because it has history down there with Derby County. But full credit to him, the turnaround since he's been there. I mean, it's not been profound, it's not been incredibly dramatic, but it's been significant. You know, it's been enough to get Swansea up and out. And they did have to obviously rely on some poor results for Hull, who I thought have just as equally as Swansea really turned the ship around since Marco Silva has gone in. But this result was key, absolutely massive for them. I think they need to thank the fixture computer for throwing up Sunderland so late in the season for them, because this was a vital game, one they had to win, and they picked the best team in the league to go and play against. So I've been impressed with them. I would like to think under Paul Clement they will slow down, they will invest, they'll go back to what they were a few seasons ago, and they can start moving up this division a bit more. But again, it's going to be a big summer. It's going to be all about the investment, who they keep, who they get rid of. I think I read this week that he wants to bring back Kyle Bartley, who's currently on loan at Leeds. So he's obviously done his research. He's still doing it. He's still got an idea of who he wants and how he wants them to play. So I'm looking forward to seeing Swansea under Paul Clement next season. I hope he gets the investment he's going to need.
Yeah, I think that Kyle Bartley piece of business might be a very good bit of business, because he's been very good, from what I can gather, at Leeds this season, and he's a player I always quite liked in the Arsenal youth system. So yeah, it's definitely a step in the right direction into the obviously the void left by Ashley Williams. They never quite replaced, although I do like Alfie Mawson. I think he's Yeah, I think he's one I'd like to see a little bit more of.
Should also be said, we're not sure on Sigurdsson yet, are we? I mean, Everton have been linked with him this week, but Southampton were linked with him a couple of weeks back now, so we don't know if he's going to be there. But if he does move on, now they've stayed up, they can command a £25 million fee for him. So I imagine that would get reinvested quite quickly.
I think he might go abroad, Gylfi. I think he might have a little trip abroad. I think he's a player who could succeed in a couple of different leagues. So, it will be interesting to see what happens to Gylfi. But we know what's happened to Hull City and Crystal Palace because on the Sunday, that result basically meant that Crystal Palace, if Crystal Palace won, then Hull were doomed. If Hull won, it went to the final day. If Hull drew, it wasn't in their hands. It was a fight-off between them and Swansea. Well, Crystal Palace won 4-0 against Marco Silva's Hull City, and it's all doom and gloom, isn't it, for Hull? And I think if you ask Mr. Welsh, he will soon tell you that Andrea Ranocchia is prone to the odd error. And it was his error in the very first 10 minutes, I think it was, that cost the opening goal, which was duly put away by Wilf Zaha. And then Palace just went on to another level and turned up the pressure. Second goal just before half-time, I think, kind of killed the game from a perspective of Hull, with Benteke and Milijevic with a penalty late on and Patrick Van Aanholt also scoring. 4-0. It's the end of Hull City in the Premier League this season. It's probably not going to be on Marco Silva this, though, is it? It's going to fall on the Steve Bruce era at the end of the season when he, of course, left. Terry Phelan, I always say this, don't I? Mike Phelan, sorry, I always say that wrong. Mike Phelan coming in, players not being sold, the management or the board level still being a mess. It's kind of been coming, hasn't it, for Hull, even though they got really close to surviving.
Yeah, I think... Well, at the start of the season, I believe they had 13 first-team players available to them, either because of injury or because of the squad size. They looked absolute certs from day one, and I think the fight back they had, especially at the start of the season under Phelan, but then again renewed under Silva at the turn of the year, gave them a lot of hope, and I think they looked. I wouldn't want to say Premier League quality, but they certainly looked like they had enough to kick on next season under someone like Marco Silva. Unfortunately, they've been swallowed whole. It's difficult to know exactly what's gone wrong here, because I've read some people say that Marco Silva got it wrong, and some other people have just said, well, the players just collapsed after the first goal. So, as someone that didn't watch the game, it's difficult to know exactly how badly or where it went wrong and why it went wrong so badly for them. But it's a shame to see them go out like this, because I think the Marco Silva story at Hull has been fantastic for not just them, but for the league. I'm not sure if this will get pinned on Silva or if he will still get something from it, because any time a manager gets relegated, there is a cloud. People will remember, oh yeah, Marco Silva was the manager that took Hull City down. Not many people will remember the state of the playing squad at the start of the season. They'll not remember the way the season's gone for them, or the backroom issues, especially as Steve Bruce came up from the Championship. So his name will be a little greater after this, but I don't think it will significantly impact him. There's rumours that Stoke will be changing their manager, Watford, West Ham, possibly Southampton. So if any of those teams do end up changing their managers, I think Marco Silva's name will still be quite high on the list. So it's a great shame for Hull. He did say after the game in his presser that he might stay. It's not the time to talk about it, but if he does stay, the board need to know and understand what they need to change, and I'm not entirely sure he's going to be able to have that conversation with someone like a Lamb. So, yeah, it's another difficult summer for another team, but I would like to think Hull can come back, but a lot will depend on what happens backstage, I think, this summer.
Agreed. I do think Marco Silva will probably move. I think it all depends on which club becomes available managerially. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the situation with Rafa Benitez at Newcastle, for example. It's the sort of club I could see him going there if Rafa wasn't given what assurances he was wanting. But then at the same time, Marco Silva might say, well, if he hasn't got them, I'm not having them either. So, but there's also a lot of clubs in and around the European leagues that will be looking for managers.
I think he's been linked to Porto this week, isn't he?
Yes, indeed, which would be a very good fit, of course. And there's a few clubs in France that might change managers. There's a couple of vacancies coming up in Spain as well. So, yeah, it would be interesting to see where he ends up. But as somebody who did watch the game, I thought it was a combination. I thought the tactics were a bit wrong, I must admit, today. But also the players, once that second goal went in, that was a killer. Once it went 2-0, I think the players just knew. And Palace, fair play to them. Salam Allardyce has come in and done a job, hasn't he? It's, again, they're a club that I think I kind of like seeing Palace around. They got brilliant ground, brilliant atmosphere, superb fans, and yeah, Sam's done it again. Can't really. He actually described it as his biggest achievement in football, which I don't know if that was a bit of a shot at the FA for letting him go on the England job, but yeah, he described it as that. I mean, do you think he will stick around with Palace as well and kick them on next season? You'd imagine he would, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think he's too smart to go looking for a new job because he's still earning back his reputation after the England debacle, isn't he? So I think Palace were kind enough to give him the role. I think they looked past what was happening with England and just looked at his career in the league. And I think with Palace, he's got the opportunity to not only rebuild them, but rebuild himself. So I think he'd be a bit foolish to leave now. But again, like you say, it depends on the kind of movements we see from the rest of the league. I mean, I can't imagine if Stoke City do end up sacking Mark Hughes, I can't imagine they'd go for someone like Sam Allardyce after wanting to move away from Tony Pulis. But given the success he's had with Palace, they might be tempted, and if they are, then his head might be turned. But I think Allardyce and Palace are a good fit. Personally, I think they just kind of go together well, and given the turnaround that's been achieved since he's gone in there, I can't see any reason why he can't move them further up the league.
No, I would agree, and like you say, it would be madness for him to walk out after the club that sort of gave him an opportunity to get back in, and he's managed to keep them up. You'd think he'd want to try and build the reputation back and get them mid-table next season. We shall see. The other issue, obviously, of course, we're going to look at for this weekend is the race for the top four. Now, it's coming down to the wire to a degree. Manchester City got a victory over Leicester City on Saturday. David Silva and Gabriel Jesus penalty with the goals there. Okazaki, got one back for Leicester, probably the goal of the game. And then Riyad Mahrez had his old double penalty, where he struck with both feet. And Leicester a bit unlucky not to come out of that with a point, but nevertheless they didn't. So Man City now fourth. Goal difference is plus 34. They go away to Watford on the final day. Liverpool played West Ham on Sunday, won 4-0. Comfortable, I think it's fair to say, in that one. Although there was a few controversial moments in that one as well. Notably the goal that was set up, or the goal that kind of set up Liverpool's second goal after West Ham were denied what looked like a very, very clear penalty. And then Liverpool running riot, Coutinho getting a couple of goals and generally looking pretty impressive. And Arsenal winning 4-1 at Stoke on the Saturday evening. We'll talk about Mark Hughes in a minute. But just on this top four race, going into this week. Now, Arsenal's still got a game in hand on Liverpool, as have Manchester City, coming into the weekend's fixtures. I must look them up. I know Arsenal at home to Sunderland, and I think from memory Manchester City got West Brom at home. I think it's West Brom. Yes, it is. They got West Brom at home. So hypothetically, if both teams win those games, Manchester City would go up to 75 points and above Liverpool, who would have 73, and Arsenal would potentially have 72 going into the final day. So where is this top four race going, do you think? Goal difference, by the way, plus 33 for Liverpool, plus 29 for Arsenal, plus 34 for Man City. So it's a bit status quo, isn't it, this weekend with all three winning?
Yeah, I'm just having a quick look at the final day fixtures. They're quite favourable. I mean, Liverpool have Middlesbrough at home, Manchester City with Watford, who have been absolutely terrible in recent weeks, and then Arsenal home to Everton. That's going to be a tricky finish. It's difficult. It's really, really difficult because Everton at that stage will only really have. Actually, no, they can't even get above Man United. So no. Everton are in sixth, and or seventh, I should say, and that's their season done. So very, very true. I mean, Liverpool and Manchester City have got two very kind fixtures to end on. Arsenal will need to rely heavily on that game in hand. They need to win that. If they don't win that, then clearly there's absolutely no hope for them, I don't think. Manchester City, I would like to think City will get maximum points from their last two games, given the fixtures they've got. But it's Liverpool that you'd look at normally and think, maybe they're a bit shaky. But the win they had this weekend, 4-0 over West Ham, caught a lot of people by surprise by the sheer volley of goals they scored. So, it's very, very difficult. I mean, the run of form that Arsenal are in at the moment, I think that they need to be backed. But given the points advantage, given the fact they're at home to Middlesbrough, I mean, Arsenal could find themselves knocked out, not because of their own turnaround, but just because the fixture list has been kind to Liverpool and City. So, yeah, it's very, very difficult. If I was to put my money on it, I think I'd probably stick with Liverpool, Manchester City at the moment. But but it could go anywhere. I didn't see enough from Middlesbrough this week to suggest that they'll be able to get anything from Liverpool, and that for me would keep them in it. And then Manchester City and Arsenal, which just depends on how the midweek goes. If one of them slips up, the other them can capitalise. But I don't see Arsenal slipping against Sunderland. So yeah, it's tighter than I thought it was. So going to be difficult. But Arsenal have a lot of the momentum behind them, but it may just be too little, too late.
Yeah, it is going to the wire. Weirdly, as you say, like the Liverpool fixture, you'd think should be a straightforward victory, but they have struggled, haven't they, in recent weeks? Is it Bournemouth and Palace and who's the other team? They dropped points at home. It's Southampton, of course. Recent memory. So yeah, it's tough, isn't it, when teams go out and they've got nothing to play for. Middlesbrough looked much better, didn't they, yesterday, for periods, even though they lost the game, and you just wonder if they're going to go up to Anfield or they're just going to sit in and hope for the best. Watford's Man City last day. I mean, I would expect Man City to beat West Brom on the midweek game. I think Tuesday or Wednesday it is. It's just very tough, isn't it? Again, I think Arsenal are probably capable of winning both their home games as well with Sunderland and Everton. But I think if there was anybody I would look at, it's maybe that Manchester City-Watford game. And not so much because I rate Watford, but just because I look at sort of Man City and I go, have they got a ricket in them? Are they prone to conceding a goal and going off the rails? And
honestly, the two I was looking at while I was talking were Arsenal-Everton, clearly, but Man City, West Brom, because West Brom could just make it extremely difficult and try and get a 0-0, and even a point for Manchester City wouldn't really be enough for them to escape Arsenal. So
yeah, it's going to go to the wire, that's for sure. I think as much as I'd like to be biased towards my own club, I think I'm probably with you. I think the two clubs that are in the places now, those being Liverpool and Manchester City, are probably the two favourites. But nevertheless, I shall keep the faith and hope for the best until things change otherwise, but we shall see. The midweek fixtures, of course, will sort it all out before next Sunday. So that was that's the top four catered for, as it were. The final game of the Premier League weekend was the farewell to White Hart Lane. Now I know I am I know I'm slightly sort of biased when I come to my views on Tottenham, but I don't really understand this whole goodbye to the lane thing, because they're not really leaving it. I'm very confused by this whole thing. I get seeing off the old kind of pitch and whatnot, but it did seem like a little bit, I don't know, it just seems a bit strange to me. Maybe it's because I don't support the team, I don't know. But they got a 2-1 victory over Manchester United to see themselves out of that ground. Where do you see Project Tottenham going post White Hart Lane / into White Hart Lane? What I mean by that is they've got a lot of money they're going to have to pay out for this new stadium. There's a lot of talk that players are going to move on. Kurt Walker seems to be the obvious one to be first in line. Is this going to be the season where they have to just adjust to Wembley and maybe try and enjoy the Champions League for a bit? Is it a case of pushing on? Because we've seen clubs here before, haven't we? And they've had brilliant seasons, and then it's all got off the rails the season after. So what do they need to do over the course of the summer and next season to be able to continue the work they've been doing to push on to where they are at the end of this season?
It's very tricky because there's so many caveats to it. If we were living in an ideal world, then Tottenham would just make the most they could of Wembley. They just treat it like a normal season, and they would just go for it and do the same kind of things they were doing this season. Build on the same team with a couple of new extra bodies, as they have been doing the past few windows, and just carry on as they are. But we also know there's a financial issue that could be coming into play here as well. We don't know if they're going to need to sell a player like Harry Kane to fund the stadium. We don't know if they're going to have the same kind of money available to them as they did last summer. So it's very difficult. I mean, the best they can hope for, in my opinion, is to just be aiming for the top four again. Even if it's finishing fourth and going through the qualifying stage the season after, the main aim should just be to try and get back into Europe next season, given the overhaul we're going to be seeing, at the very least in terms of the stadium, but possibly as well with the first team. So it's difficult. I mean, if you look at it in terms of about 10 years, then I think this stadium move is going to be very good for them. And in 10 years' time, I think Tottenham will be in a much stronger position for it. But the short term to the medium term is going to be difficult because we just don't know all the caveats yet. They could turn up with £100 million to spend over the summer, or they could turn up with 10 million and need to raise the rest from player sales. So if they kept everything as is, I don't think they'd be too worse off, but it will depend a lot on how they adapt to Wembley at that point. And then again, it will just be aiming for the top four. But the damage that could be done to that squad over the summer is a rather large caveat that I can't really factor in at the moment, because I just don't know. I just don't know how much money they're going to have to spend.
No, it is hard to say. I mean, it's all Captain Hindsightism, isn't it, at this stage? And it will be interesting to see how many of those players they retain, or, of course, if they do let a couple of those big players go, who they might potentially bring in. So that will be an interesting one to keep an eye on. And as we say, it's the end of White Hart Lane, so yes, they will be moving to the new stadium the season after next. But as I say, it's on the same plot, so it's all a bit strange.
Don't they have a cheese room or something silly going in?
Yes. Don't feed the monster, Ross. I will. I've got to be impartial on this podcast, but I think that was utterly ludicrous.
We will get to a club in the National League that are coming up with a strange stadium as well, but that's certainly one I'd never heard of before I'd heard about this new White Hart Lane move.
It's very, very nouveau riche, isn't it? But yes, cheese room and all. They're obviously on the way, and they've had whatever sort of views I have personally. They've had a fantastic season and have definitely kicked on. Bit early for this power shift talk, I've got to be honest, but the rest of it, it's good to see two clubs competing in the same space in London for bragging rights.
I was about to ask, do you have a favourite memory from White Hart Lane? But I'm amazed. I would be amazed if there wasn't one that leapt out at you immediately.
Oh, there is. Winning the title at White Hart Lane twice would be my two favourite memories. Ashley Cole planting the blow-up championship trophy on the centre circle is a particular highlight. Sorry, Spurs fans. But, those, obviously I'm going to be biased. I can't help that. Also, Mathieu Flamini becoming Messi for a night was quite fun.
Yeah, even I remember that. That was incredible.
Yes. As for a Tottenham memory, naturally there aren't many that leap to mind for me, but I will sort of always remember the days of Jurgen Klinsmann scoring goals for them and doing that celebration, if you remember rightly. And I'll also remember that sort of season when they had I think it was the days where they had the Holston kits, that kind of era, and they went on sort of this run under what was the guy's name? No, it wasn't. It was before the George Graham era. What was the manager called then? In fact, it might even have been Glenn Hoddle here, actually.
I'm afraid I can't help you here, but...
No, but no, they did play some very good stuff in that era, was the point I was going to get to. And they were entertaining, if you could sort of take off your hat, from my point of view anyway. But I mean, there's some good memories down that stadium. The one thing I can't deny is the atmosphere down there is fantastic. A little hostile whenever I've been, naturally, but it is a fantastic ground, and it's probably another one of those old stadiums that we'll look back on in 10, 20 years and go, yeah, that was like the old days. And obviously now we're fast moving away from those stadiums into a new era of new stadiums and new setups. So it's the end of an era for Spurs in that particular stadium. As for Manchester United, they made the Europa League final, obviously midweek, which we covered on the Satchel. But they still don't impress me. They really don't. I thought they were really, really poor today at stages. I know they had a bit of a squad rotation and whatnot. But if Jose Mourinho doesn't win the Europa League, do we have to look at this season as a failure? Because for me, I've heard Man United fans say that they're a lot better under Mourinho. I just don't see it. I still think they're very, very defensive, very, very dull. And very functional, and this is Manchester United we're talking about here. This is one of the biggest clubs in English football history. Surely they should be aiming higher than just managing out games, shouldn't they?
Well, that depends on the manager, really. I think we've seen not brilliant managers go in at Man United since Sir Alex Ferguson left. I know Louis van Gaal has a much greater reputation than David Moyes has, but I was not a huge fan of his Man United era, but they've gone in and tried to change the ethos of the club, and they've tried to make sure it's successful. And Mourinho's just gone about it in his way, but unfortunately his way often means killing games flat when they've got a lead or protecting a point against a team that he thinks that they're going to struggle against. So, again, much like Southampton, it comes down to an argument of style. Now, I only really know one person in my private life that likes football outside of this podcast. He lives in Manchester, supports Barrow in the non-league, but grew up with the Sir Alex Ferguson era. And he's a big fan of the fact that Mourinho has managed to grind out the EFL Cup. He's ground out the Europa League final, and he feels quietly confident about them beating Ajax in the final. So, but he also says to me that there's a lot of people that complain, that Man United don't play that free-flowing attacking football they used to under Sir Alex. They're not, famed for their endeavour and adventure anymore. They're just about sealing out games, getting points, and winning cups. Now, for Mourinho, that'll be enough. For fans, it might not be. Mourinho, I think, is still in that breed of manager that buys his team better rather than coaches them better. So the summer will be big for them. If they end up buying Griezmann and they keep hold of Ibrahimovic, then you never know what they're going to be able to do next season. But the style issue is just personal, I think. They are a club that I associate with better football, and they are a club I associate with being higher in the division. But at the same time, they've won the EFL Cup. They could be winning the Europa League. In 10 years' time, I'm not sure many people will remember that Mourinho played boring football. They'll just remember that he was the first manager to come in and win Man United the Europa League.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's just. I suppose it's just that it's like I said to you earlier on, watching the vintage of the era under Ferguson, the treble winning Man United, etc. I just don't get it wrong. I'm quite happy to see them quite dull at the moment and not particularly tearing up any trees. I dread to think of having the Ferguson era back again. We never win anything ever again. But I just think as a club of United stature and size, there's just something when I watch them that they just don't seem to click anymore. They don't seem to be what I remember them as.
I think the thing is, though, I've had this conversation with my friend about this as well. I think that just kind of underlines how damn good a manager Sir Alex Ferguson was. Because there's got to be a point where we have to stop saying that, the Man United team of old were great, why can't Mourinho do that? Well, he's not Sir Alex Ferguson. I don't think we'll see another one as good as Sir Alex Ferguson was, and what he did for that team was quite incredible. And the fact they've fallen away, I think, is understandable. And now they've not fallen away dramatically. 6th in the Premier League is not great, but they're still winning cups. They're still competing in Europe. So it's not like they've had a colossal crash, not this season at least. But I don't think you're going to be able to compare them to Sir Alex Ferguson forever. I think there's got to be a point where we have to just say, you know what, now that we've seen them post Sir Alex, we can appreciate how good that man was, and no one else is going to come near it, so we just have to kind of go with where we are now.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. It is a tough one. Again, Man United supporters and whatnot listening into this will have very different views. We'll have to ask our friend Tom what he thinks of the season overall at some point. But nevertheless, they've, as you say, they've won one trophy, and they have got to a final of another. And obviously, we'll cover it on the Satchel Extra edition after the Cup finals of the Champions League and Europa League to see whether they can achieve the victory of that or not. Okay, that's the Premier League then. We're not going to bother with a table this week because, frankly, there's no point. We've covered the big issues. We know who's been relegated. Sunderland, Middlesbrough and Hull have gone, and we know it's going to be between Manchester City, Arsenal or Liverpool for those final two spots in the top four, subject, of course, to the midweek games upcoming. I suppose we should just give our listeners a heads up on those, because this time of the year it's all a little bit crazy about who's playing when and who's playing what. So in midweek we've got today, recording this of course on Sunday, we've got a Monday game. We've got Chelsea Watford, actually that's tomorrow night. We've got Arsenal Sunderland on Tuesday, Manchester City West Brom on the same night, Southampton Manchester United on the Wednesday, Leicester against Spurs on the Thursday. And then, of course, on the final day of the Premier League season, all the teams play at once, all at 3 o'clock. I know that's novel. Arsenal, Everton, Burnley, West Ham, Chelsea, Sunderland, Hull, Spurs, Leicester, Bournemouth, Liverpool, Middlesbrough, Manchester United, Palace, Southampton, Stoke, Swansea, West Brom, Watford, Manchester City. Just finally, before we move on from the Premier League, just very quickly on Mark Hughes and Stoke. A lot of very angry Stoke fans again after Arsenal rocked up yesterday and took them apart for long periods, it has to be said. Can you see, is that another club that we might be looking at another managerial change in the summer?
Yeah, I think he's plateaued. I think he's done as well as he can do at Stoke. There's a story out this week that he might have to sell Gianni Mbulo, and the only reason he really gave was that it hasn't worked out, So I think there's more going on behind the scenes at Stoke than perhaps we know. And the chairman is, from history anyway, is one that is perfectly happy to do the slow build, but wants to see progress, and I think they've regressed. So I think Mark Hughes has taken them as far as he can. I think he's changed the ethos of the club. They're not so much a rugby club anymore. They do play a bit more football than they used to, but I think they need fresh blood, and I think the fans are ready for it as well. So I'd be surprised if he's still there come the start of the new season. But yeah, it's a sad way to go out, because I don't think he's done a bad job at Stoke, but this season in particular, I think they've really regressed.
Yeah, little bit stale, which is anything but what the EFL playoffs situation are like. Now, I'm just literally going to hand it over to you at this stage. Now, we've got a couple of games going on as we speak, which we'll update our listeners on just coming up to half-time in both, which we'll cover in a minute. But I'm assuming you want to start in the Championship, so I will let you start there and work your way down. What's the state of play as we head into these playoffs?
Yeah, we've had both of the first legs of the Championship semi-finals. Fulham 1, Reading 1 was an excellent game. I thought, I think Josh and I have spoken about this the past couple of weeks, that both he and I thought Reading were going to be the least favourites to come out of these playoffs, but they did a very good job against Fulham. I think they've learnt their lessons from not just their season, but Fulham's season. They clearly worked on their defensive shape during the break they had, and they looked very, very good and very comfortable against Fulham. 1-1 is not going to suit either of them. I think if Reading could have sat on the 1-0 they had, they'd have been a lot happier going into the second leg, but now they're going to have to try and open the game up. They're going to have to try and score a goal against Fulham. And I think that's going to play into Fulham's hands. So it's an excellent result for Fulham. I think Reading will be a little bit frustrated with it. Huddersfield Town 0, Sheffield Wednesday 0 was pretty blood and thunder. I don't think it was the greatest game of football in the world, but it was certainly a good-natured derby. Sheffield Wednesday, I think, are going into these playoffs essentially as the favourites up there with Fulham, and they gave Huddersfield a very good game. But I think Huddersfield also returned fire for most of those 90 minutes, kind of cancelled each other out. So it's going to be another very energetic blood and thunder game on Wednesday night to see who can get to the final. Not really many indicators from what I saw about which team's going to be favourite to escape the second leg, but we've had some very cagey playoffs this year, which has kind of disappointed me. But we're not having them in League 2 at the moment, I can assure you. But Leagues 1 and the Championship have been a bit cagey, and I'd like to see those fixtures come alive in the second leg. League 1, we already have our final. It's going to be Bradford versus Millwall. I think when Josh and I were recording last week, the semi-final legs were going on, and it ended up Millwall 3, Scunthorpe 2 on aggregate, and Bradford City 1, Fleetwood Town 0 on aggregate, which sends Bradford and Millwall through to the final. League 2, I think Chris will be able to update you with that in a minute, because I don't have any live scores in front of me, but I can tell you there's a lot of goals going in. And the National League, we have our promoted team from the playoffs. We have Forest Green Rovers, who are coming up. They beat Tranmere Rovers 3-1 in the playoff final. Kane Woolery and Christian Doige with the goals that took them up. So Forest Green will be in the in the Football League, I should say. I think it's the first time in about 100+ years that Forest Green have been up in the Football League. They are the team, by the way, that have the funny stadium coming, because they have a stadium being built that's going to be made completely out of wood. I think it's going to be solar powered, and you're not going to be able to buy any real meat in any of your hot dogs or burgers while you're there. It's all going to be tofu and vegetarian options. So it's not to everyone's tastes, I can assure you. It's certainly not to mine, but yeah, they're an interesting club, Forest Green, and they do have a lot of money behind them, so they will make a splash in League 2. So, Chris, that's the state of play in our playoffs. I don't know how many of these you've seen, but personally, I've been a little let down by the tempo, except for in League 2, by the sounds of things.
Yeah, I must be honest. I didn't see the Championship game yesterday because, of course, I was watching the Arsenal game, so I didn't see the Fulham Reading game. But I saw the score, and I was I wouldn't say surprised, but I thought Fulham would probably get at least a lead in that game. So clearly Reading did a good job today. And I was speaking to a friend of the pod, Natalie, about Sheffield Wednesday today, who apparently were very, very sort of stubborn in their resistance against Huddersfield Town, and the way the Huddersfield sort of players came off, reported the fans, it had a sort of a feel of like we kind of know that we're underdogs now for the second leg. So I think Sheffield Wednesday will still be my strong favourites in that second leg for that game. But as for the other one, I think it is anyone's game, because Fulham's style, from what I've seen of this season, could well suit the Medeski pitch. That it's quite a big pitch, isn't it, the Medeski? So, I could see Fulham potentially opening up and being a counter-attacking side, and just sitting and seeing what Reading have got in the second leg. So, and they're in midweek as well, aren't they? These two games.
Yeah.
So I'd still have my money on a Fulham Sheffield Wednesday final at the moment, but they're very, very close to call. Bradford Millwall, I fancy Millwall in that final, but again, just based on the limited amount I've seen of them this season. And then the other games we've got going on at the moment. Yes, there's been goals going in. Indeed, Exeter, took the lead at Carlisle 1-0 up, and then were pegged back to 1-1 and have gone in at the break 2-1 up, because they just got the goal just before half time. And the Blackpool game also has had 3 goals. Blackpool went in front. Cullen with the opening goal. Keeper should have done a lot better, by the way. And then 2 goals in the space of 2 minutes for Luton, turned that one completely on its head. First Luton goal for Potts, who earlier on got his head smashed in and had blood all over his face, and then pops up with a goal. So that's always nice for him, isn't it? But yeah, Luton looked to be in control of that one as we speak. And as we say, Exeter, which I know both you and I have got a bit of a thing for Paul Tisdale and his suits. So Old Tizzy. So, and I've spoken to a few of my Argyle supporting friends who, of course, enjoyed the victory parade last week. And they're, in a weird sort of perverse way, kind of hoping Exeter come up so that they can continue their rivalry next season. Because, of course, there isn't really another derby for Plymouth down here. We've got the dockyard derby, so to speak, or the naval derby with Portsmouth, but it's not really a real derby. So I think even Argyle fans wouldn't be against Exeter coming up. So, well, I wonder, do you have a view on those 2 playoff games?
I fully expect Luton and Exeter to be the ones that go through, personally. I think Blackpool would be very disappointed to not go through because they had an excellent run in at the end of this season. Carlisle's collapse this season has been almost comical at times, but I personally think it's going to be Exeter coming up from League 2, but Luton Town are a very industrious League 2 side. They just get the job done. So I think it will probably be Luton Exeter in the final, and then it will just come down to who wants it more, I think, because the turnaround at Exeter, they were bottom of the league in November, and now they're here. So fantastic story for Exeter, but I can't let this wooden stadium thing hover, Chris. I need to ask you about Forest Green. Are you? It's strange, bizarre.
It's odd, isn't it?
A wooden stadium. I mean, it's nice to see because it's going in the right direction, and I'm all for protecting the planet and that sort of stuff. But the wooden stadium bit, I'm okay with. The bit I don't like is the idea that if you're a meat eater and you go to watch a game at Forest Green, you are not allowed a proper meat sausage roll or whatever you may want. That to me seems a little off, but I can't fault them for going in the right direction, I suppose.
No, I mean, I'm with you. I think that the lack of being able to offer choice is a little bit strange. In fact, very strange. So, yeah, I can kind of see your point on that one. I wonder what the prices are going to be for this eco food as well. Like, is it going to be sort of Emirates prices? Because if it is, I don't think that'll catch on very quickly. The modern day football fan is quite a simple creature generally. I mean, I don't know about you, Ross. When I go to games, I don't really buy food from the ground. I tend to eat before I go in, and I'm there to watch a football match, and then I go off and have something to eat afterwards. I don't really sort of feel the need to eat during games myself, but obviously a lot of people do like the old halftime refreshments. I'm a non-drinker as well, so it doesn't really bother me the cost of things because I just take a bottle of water in with me and away I go. So, but yeah, the modern day football fan is a simple creature, and I don't know whether this might be a little bit highbrow for some people maybe. But like you, I mean, I'm all for the idea of trying something different, and this wooden stadium is it's all a bit Alien 3 to me, but I don't know. We shall see, I suppose.
I'm just going to send you a picture which will mean nothing to the friends of the podcast who are actually listening to us, but this I'll just send Chris a picture of it. It looks quite spectacular, but it's I'm still not entirely sure. I'd have to see it built first, but it's £100 million. It's going to be called the Eco Park. So. Eco
Park, yeah. I mean, if nothing else, it's very different, isn't it? It's very niche, isn't it? That's the one thing that they're taking a gamble outside of the norm of this super stadium. Do we know what the capacity is going to be?
I'm just going to have a quick read now. I've just found a news article documenting it. I'll see if I can find it, but it looks very pretty from the conceptual art. It's just whether or not it's going to come out as well as the art looks. But like I say, you can't fault them for going in the right direction. This might really catch on. We can't odds that, but. There's also going to be issues of fire hazards, etc. So there's clearly that's going to have played into the build. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see it in League 2, assuming it comes in that quickly.
Yeah, and very good for Forest Green as well to win, because I think Tranmere were heavy favourites, weren't they, overall for that? At least from what I can gather, anyway, they were quite strong favourites for that tie. So
going to be a 5,000 seater stadium.
5,000. Okay, so it's not like it's huge and lots of things have to go into it. It is fairly simple, a simple sort of style stadium. So maybe. I mean, we'll see. I guess is all we can say. We'll see if it turns out to be a monumental change in regards to football stadiums. Then great. If not, and it all comes crashing down, then well. I guess that's what we'll have to deal with. But
if you're interested in seeing that conceptual art, by the way, listeners, if you just go to Google and search for the new Eco Stadium, I think it's called the Eco Park. I just said. The story I just found was from the Mirror, dated February 2017. There's some conceptual art in there if you want to see it. It looks quite spectacular, but we'll just have to see how it comes out in real life.
Yes. Do have a look at that, listeners. Let us know what you think, or indeed if you live in a country that's got something similar. I think the only thing I can think that's close to it is the Portland Timbers. Nothing to do with the stadium, just the fact they cut logs off every time they score a goal. That's the only thing I can. Maybe they could send over the logs to help build the new stadium for Forest Green. But yes, it's different. It's different, and we will see how it all develops. Are they going in next season, or is this a long term?
I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's next season, but I'd have to do some more research, which is always difficult live on a podcast. But I think it's next season, but I'd have to double check.
Interesting. Okay, well, there we go. That's this week sort of rounded up then as far as the EFL and Premier League goes. Now we didn't ask for questions this week, mainly because we knew it had only been me and Ross, so we didn't want to get sort of too bogged down in just us two talking forever and ever more. So it probably will be a slightly shorter week this week. Just overall, Ross, I just wanted to sort of gauge your opinion on the seasons as a whole, particularly from your standpoint in the EFL element of things. We are probably going to touch on this a little bit more detail when we do the actual EFL kind of review. I guess you and I will sit down and do a pod, I'm sure, in the summer about reviewing the season. But seeing as next week will be Premier League heavy, given the fact that that is the final day, I just wanted to give you a platform to talk EFL briefly and just tell us whether has it been a season you'll remember? Are there teams that really stand out? And how many teams do you think will be very busy in the summer, particularly with those three coming up to the Premier League?
Well, across the EFL, I think League Two has been brilliant this season, mainly because this season has been the first one that I've treated League Two in the same way I treat League One in the Championship, because obviously I've been doing this podcast and we've been covering the EFL across the board. I've needed to clue myself in more on League Two, and I've really enjoyed League Two this season. I think I'll remember for a very long time the Hartlepool and Leyton Orient relegations, especially Leyton Orient. And Portsmouth, I think the official count they spent at the top of the table in League Two this season was 38 minutes, something around that mark, and they ended up winning it. So I'll probably remember that for a very long time as well. League One has been extremely competitive, and it's really nice to see Sheffield United come back up. There's no standout team for me in League One, but certainly the Coventry situation is one that I'll remember, and Tactics Tim going into Swindon Town and getting them relegated. And then the Championship, the question really should be aimed at you, because I think this is your first full season with this division. But I've really enjoyed it. I think next season I'm going to enjoy it more, because we're going to lose Newcastle and Brighton, who have swallowed so much of the oxygen this season. But the toing and froing between those two for the title, and the fact that about 7-8 weeks ago we thought, well, Newcastle have got this because they've just beaten Brighton and Huddersfield in the same week, and then it came down to the last game of the season, and even then Brighton managed to throw it away because they conceded a goal to Jack Grealish. So it's been a fantastic title race. The relegation zones, I think, were largely tied up. The last day drama was still pretty memorable. But the playoffs, I think I'll probably remember Leeds for a long time as well, given the crash they had, and the enigma that was Norwich City is probably going to be the main highlight that I think we'll all take away from this, and my continued confusion about the future of Alex Neil. But yeah, realistically, I suppose the question should be batted back towards you, since this is your first full season with the Championship. Have you enjoyed it?
Yeah, I have. It's funny, we had this question on last week, where somebody asked us, should there be Championship available more? I don't know if you heard us address that question on the podcast main last week, but they were saying, should there be more games live? Should there be more coverage European or worldwide? Because it is so exciting. Because we only really get the Friday night games, don't we, and the Saturday evening games. And the trouble is, especially in the Saturday evening games, you've got a Premier League game on the opposite station, so that largely gets the attention for the general viewing public rather than the diehards. And then we don't really get any other games sort of midweek. There's lots of midweek fixture rounds for the Championship because there's so many games. It's 42 every season. So I'd like to see more midweek Championship broadcasting next season to give people more exposure if we can. But no, I've enjoyed it. As I said, Fulham I've really enjoyed. And I'm a bit of a quandary now, because obviously I'd like Sheffield Wednesday to come back, because they're a proper old school Premier League side. But I really like Fulham as well, and I'd love to go back to Craven Cottage again and see Fulham. So I'm a bit torn on there. As far as the other season, I think the main thing I remember, particularly from the Championship this season, is just the staggering drop in form of some of the big names. Those clubs down the bottom end, the Birminghams, the Forests, the Blackburns that have gone, and there's some big clubs down there that have had really bad seasons. I mean, even clubs that have finished safe in the table, QPR, Aston Villa, as you said before, Norwich have underachieved. There's so many big clubs in that division. That when you look at, you'd say they are Premier League worthy clubs, or they're Premier League names. And if you look at the Premier League era, how many teams that are not now in it that started in the first 2 or 3 seasons, it's an amazing drop off. So I have enjoyed it, and as you say, like EFL, I don't get to see too much below the Championship. Only sort of the occasional League 1, League 2 games. But even that, the bits and bobs I've watched, I've enjoyed. Much like you, Sheffield United have impressed me. I've seen a little bit of Argyle living in the area, and the rise of sort of clubs like Exeter, Bristol Rovers, having just been re-promoted to the Football League, have had a good season. So, yeah, there's some key stories. Bolton is another one I want to give a mention to as well, because they've been through the ringer sort of financially and what's gone on with them. So it's nice to see them coming back up.
I believe they still have to go through another winding up order yet, Bolton.
They do, yes, they do. And that was exactly what I was going to say. Sadly, it brings us to clubs like Leyton Orient and still Coventry as well, clubs that are still fighting for their existence. And hopefully that those clubs can get through the mire of their summer issues. And one thing's for sure, we will revisit the Championship probably once or twice throughout the summer and just see who's bringing in what and whatnot, and I'm sure we'll have to talk about some new kits as well, which is always my big fandom. So I've enjoyed it. I've learnt more having you on the podcast and talking to you about it than I had done previously, when people haven't really had the access to ask the questions I ask you on a weekly basis, for example. So I have enjoyed it. And roll on again next season. And I'm sure I'll have another baffling prediction for you this time next season of who I think we're going to go. I've already got a club in mind that's going to blow you away when I come out with it. So I might save that.
Cardiff or Brentford or something, isn't it?
No, neither of those two. No, it's a club that have had a pretty turmoil season, but I think with the right ownership and the right signings in the summer might be coming back. So, yes, I'll let that one hang in the ether. Maybe the listeners can work out who I'm talking about, but they are a Championship club, I will stress. But there you go. Okay, right. Well, I think that will draw us to a close then. Just a very quick side note: if you noticed a slight difference in the audio throughout this podcast, it's unfortunately I had a bit of a broken headset very shortly into the pod. So if the audio has sounded a little bit different in the second half of the pod, I do apologise. I will work on getting another headset sorted out. Certainly won't be in time for tomorrow, sadly, but I'm sure I'll be able to get one sorted for next week. So apologies, listeners, if you couldn't enjoy this podcast because of my tinniness. So hopefully it doesn't come across too badly. But that will do us for this week. As I say, you can follow us at the FH Podcast. Send us your tweets and questions for next week's / tomorrow's podcast, where we'll be rounding up all the European action. John and I will be back. I know Joel is away, and I think Drew is away again, so it might be another 2-man crew tomorrow. But John's got lots of love to give Crotone, so tune in for that one. And I might well be talking about new French champions come the end of this evening as well. So tune in for that one. You can follow us, of course, on Twitter, but you can also find us on SoundCloud, YouTube. You can check out iTunes and, of course, our website for all the goings on. So do keep an eye on those pages. And keep tweeting us your bits and bobs. We appreciate you very much. And look out for a blog that will be going up this week, which is our good friend Tom's. I've done all the editing now. I just need to get it posted at a suitable time. So probably later on next week, you will see that pop up. So thanks to Tom for that. Right, Ross, thank you very much for this evening. And keep watching those Championship games for us this week.
It certainly will. Pleasure as ever.
And indeed EFL games, I should say, not just Championship. But yes, we'll be back next week with our final standard English breakfast game or podcast of the season, and we'll leave you with the news that Blackpool have just got level with Luton, so that's now 2-2. So until next week's show, keep your beard strong and your glasses trendy, and indeed your broken headsets working. Till next week, we've been the Football Hipsters, and we'll speak to you very soon.